Ridhi Tariyal. My company is called NextGen Jane. People think it's a smart tampon company, but it's actually a company that provides agency in the lives of women. Historically, the agency of women has been compromised in reproductive rights. And so if you think about it, the decision as to when they want to have children, the ability to protect themselves from disease, more broadly choice when it comes to their body, all of these things have been challenged. And what we're trying to do is push forward the envelope where women can make decisions about their reproductive health through information. And so there's this great deficit of when I have that anxious question about my reproductive health, who do I call? And that's the role and the gap that Jane wants to fill. So the one way that we came upon was a tampon, and specifically the form factor of a tampon gives you a unique singular access to a woman's reproductive system like nothing else short of a biopsy. A woman takes a tampon that we provide to her. It is a completely normal tampon, and then she would put it into a proprietary container that we provided to her, and that's where we do something to the tampon that allows us to examine genomic signals back at the lab.
All of these different cells have specific signatures, and so if we're looking at endometrial cells, for example, they will have specific signals that correlate to different diseases like endometriosis, where if we're actually looking at ovarian cells, we may be able to pick up things like ovarian cancer. Polycystic ovarian syndrome actually runs in my family. I have a sister that has it, my mother had it, I have a niece that has it. I've had a sister that struggled with cervical cancer. For me, this was a direct way of being able to help them and impact their lives as well as their children's lives.
There's so many tech companies these days that collect your data and sell it. But at NextGen Jane, we want to collect your data and share it with your sisters. Through the massive amount of data that we're collecting, we're building a pipeline and data analytics that can tell you whether you're sick or you're healthy. And like with any information-based problem, the more you feed it, the better it gets. And so by contributing, what women do is allow us to make the system smarter and create a better future for our daughters going forward. We see this as something that transitions from the doctor's office directly into the hands of a woman. There's no reason that she wouldn't eventually be able to get the results and understand them, just like an over-the-counter pregnancy test or an over-the-counter HIV test.
Our ultimate goal is to make this technology cheap and affordable and accessible to everyone.
For example, cervical cancer is something that's very well managed in the West, but in the emerging markets, it's one of the leading cancer deaths in the rest of the world.
One of our biggest passions is to empower women to take care of themselves, and it shouldn't be a matter of where you live or how much money you make that determines whether you're able to do that.
And Jane is your friend, your mentor. She's your doctor, and she provides you not only with advice, but for the first time, a really great molecular way to find out what's going on in your body when you're worried.
Wow, what an incredible night. It's truly an honor to be with you here tonight. I've had the privilege of serving as a board member and donor to the EndoFound for a little over 6 years now. I suspect that my journey to this podium will not be unfamiliar to many of the people in this room. It started with my first period. I had never experienced anything that painful before in my life. I still remember the helpless look on my father's face as he watched his otherwise healthy child writhe in pain on the floor. When I later spoke to my Aunt Nane, which is what we call our maternal grandmothers in Turkey, where I was born, she said, "Oh, that happens to some of the women in our family. It's a normal part of being a woman, but don't worry, it will get better after you have a baby." But for me, that journey to motherhood didn't start until my early 30s. By then, I had already endured 2 decades of living with a disease I never had a name for. And that disease had made an indelible mark on my body and my life trajectory. I say journey to motherhood because, like many of you, it was not an easy path for me. But it was a path that thankfully brought me to Dr. Tamer Seçkin's door. Within a year of meeting Dr. Seçkin, my first child, Oliver, was born. Oliver's here with me tonight. And so are my other miracle babies, Quentin and Isabel. Wave hello, my loves. Quentin's the 9-year-old who won the Mykonos trip, y'all. Just as my journey to pregnancy was not easy, neither were my pregnancies. Oliver and I underwent an emergency delivery because I had advanced preeclampsia. It returned with Quentin and then again with Isabel. In addition, during the ultrasound visit when I first saw Isabel's heartbeat, I learned that I had a large cyst, which, as many of you know, may be aware, is a common complication of endometriosis. And as it grew bigger than a grapefruit, became a life-threatening complication of that pregnancy for both me and Isabel. There are so many endo warrior stories in this room. What makes mine a little different than a typical endometriosis warrior is that I also stand here as someone who's been innovating as a scientist and later as an entrepreneur in the women's health space for over 20 years. When I started my career as a researcher, endometriosis was considered a reproductive condition. Now we know it is so much more than reproductive. In fact, one of the things that my research group at Cellmatics, a biotech focused on advancing novel women's health therapeutics, discovered on our path is that endometriosis shares underlying biological risk factors with so many conditions like preeclampsia. So what starts off as period pain in our teenage years, when only treated on a symptom level and never really cured, can evolve into infertility, pregnancy complications, and then eventually autoimmune disorders and heart disease. The list is long. Our journeys are unique to each of us, and yet have a common biological thread in processes like inflammation and endocrine function. Understanding the biology and genetics of this disease is a first step to the ultimate dream of diagnosing it and treating it earlier. The Foundation has assembled an all-star team of the top endometriosis scientists to not only receive funding for their groundbreaking research, but to also pay it forward to colleagues around the world who apply for funding through our research grants program. Last year alone, we received over 60 applications. With more funding, we could make an even bigger impact, especially given endometriosis continues to be vastly underfunded by the NIH. However, ultimately, we need entrepreneurs and companies that can take these discoveries and turn them into products that improve the lives of people living with this disease. My children are aware of my journey. They know that mommy has pain and is more tired during her periods. And so my daughter stopped me in my tracks on the way to school a few months ago when she asked me, "Mommy, will your medicines be ready for me?" The truth is, at the pace that we're innovating, they may not be. And that is what inspired me to fund this new award. The Endometriosis Foundation Innovation Award recognizes private sector innovators, like our inaugural honoree this year, Ridhi Tariyal, the founder and CEO of NextGen Jane. The funds will be donated to expand the research grants program, but will recognize the work of pioneers like Ridhi, who aren't just progressing incredible science, they're working to turn that science into a new standard of care. And before I invite Ridhi to accept her award, let me tell you a little bit about why we felt that Ridhi was the perfect first honoree. The diagnostic space for detection of endometriosis has started to heat up, and you may have seen articles in the news about smart tampons and using menstrual blood for detecting a range of conditions like endometriosis. But what you may not know is that Ridhi and her team at NextGen Jane have been working on this for over a decade. It had occurred to people to look for disease markers in menstrual blood. Ridhi and NextGen Jane saw this potential early and actually went about the hard work of not only building data sets to make sense of the fire hose of information that comes out of genomic analysis of menstrual blood, but also worked on the challenges of how you develop kits to allow that menstrual sample to make it from a menstruating body to a lab that can generate that data. Challenges like the latter can be the difference between great science becoming great care and just ending up gathering dust in a journal article. We know that living with endometriosis is hard, but let me tell you, fundraising to innovate in this space is extremely challenging as well. Ridhi isn't just one of the smartest scientists I know, she's also one of the most tenacious. She and NextGen Jane give me the hope that the next time my daughter asks me the question about whether these innovations will be ready in time for her, my answer without hesitation will be yes. please join me in another round of applause for Ridhi Tariyal, the 2024 recipient of the Endometriosis Innovation Award.
I just want to start by saying, Isabel, we got you. Thank you, Pariah, for your kind words, and Endometriosis Foundation for this wonderful evening, all the work that you do for endometriosis patients, and for this recognition. I am a product of the 1980s. As a young immigrant from India, I learned English by watching television. This was before streaming, so I watched what was on. As a 6-year-old, two formative shows from my childhood were The Jetsons and The Flintstones. For the benefit of any millennials or Gen Zers or Gen Alphas in the audience tonight, The Jetsons were a futuristic space-age family with robotic maids, flying cars, holographic Christmas trees, and jetpacks. The Flintstones were a Stone Age family who lived in the time of dinosaurs and coexisted with woolly mammoths and the like. They had cars too, footmobiles that were powered by feet, not motors. Funny, yes. Aspirational, no. But the Jetsons made me excited. They made me excited about what the world I would inherit from the hard work of past generations. As an adult, it's fun to evaluate whether the incredible new technologies that are emerging are fulfilling the promises the Jetsons made on an entire generation of impressionable young people. A software program that takes your stream of conscious prompts and returns a coherent answer. Very Jetsons. A simple blood test that can screen for multiple cancers. Definitely Jetsons. Multiple private companies working on competing interstellar space travel efforts. Wow. Basically from the writing room of the Jetsons. But I work in women's health. And so often I encounter news headlines in the year of our Lord, 2024, and think to myself, it's giving Flintstones. From zombie laws from the 1800s being resurrected before women had the right to vote, before women had a say in the making of these laws, definitely Flintstones. Endometriosis, a chronic inflammatory condition being treated by chemically inducing menopause. That's more Flintstones than it is Jetsons. Things are changing, and they are worth celebrating. There are many people working on simple, non-invasive ways of diagnosing endometriosis. There are many people taking completely novel approaches to developing drugs for the condition, and these efforts will take time to come to fruition. Thank you all for your continued voice and your advocacy and your demands for adequate funding. While we wait for our jetpacks and our flying cars, we can voice our desire for our fantastic future to include tampons that can diagnose disease and therapies that can make a difference for menstrual disorders. Just talking about it helps bring it into existence. NextGen Jane started working on the idea of using menstrual blood for diagnostic purposes in 2013. Back then, we had to use so many euphemisms to talk about menstrual disorders in polite settings. It was an exercise in absurdity. I once had an investor exclusively refer to menstruation as that time of the month where a woman does whatever she does. This opaque language isn't just an inconvenience. It's an indication of what we find respectable and worthy of pursuit as a society. The real consequence was that fewer doors were open to entertaining the idea of menstrual blood as a rich source of information about our bodies. It's been over 10 years since we first had those conversations. I can tell you that we collectively, all of us together, have shifted the Overton window on public discourse about menstruation, infertility, female bodies, menopause, and more. And that has already made a difference on how fast we can transform care for patients with endometriosis. Moonshots are not only relegated to space travel. The future belongs to all of us. And I envision a Jetsonian future where women have a say in the next horizon of their own health, where funding for women's health reflects how we spend dollars on things like artificial intelligence, and where women can ask stream of conscious questions and get back accurate and reliable data about their bodies. And all of that is only possible with support from people like you. So thank you.